Back Porch Sports, presented by Duck Club Bourbon. Scott Hamilton here for the next hour, rolling solo, taking a lap around the Southeastern Conference and college football in general. After all, we've only got a couple of weekends before college football season starts. We've got that game over in Dublin, Ireland. UNC and TCU going to kick off week 0. But after that, then we really get cranking. First SEC team to play will be Missouri. Going to play host to Arkansas Pine Bluff on the night of Thursday, September 3rd. That's 7 p.m. Central kickoff. And then the next night, Oklahoma is going to host UTEP, also 7 o'clock Central kickoff. Both those on the SEC network. And then things flip to Saturday, Labor Day Saturday. Auburn, a 7-point favorite versus Baylor in the Chick-fil-A kickoff in Atlanta's Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Then the big one, LSU versus Clemson in Baton Rouge. That's primetime ABC game. Right now, LSU favored by 9.5. And I've got some more news on LSU later in the show. Lane Kiffin's going to Lane Keifin no matter where he goes, be it Oxford or Baton Rouge or L.A. or wherever. Yeah, he's got another circus on his hands. We'll touch on that later in the program. Don't forget Labor Day, Sunday night, Kiffin's old team, the Ole Miss Rebels, 6.5-point favorites right now over Louisville in Nashville. Primetime ABC game. I'm high on that Louisville team, by the way. I think the Cardinals, with the Brown Boys, no relation, might actually have the best backfield in America. So that's definitely going to be worth watching. Some news on 3 Sports dropping its preseason top 25. Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, Georgia. There's your top 4. Then you have Notre Dame, Indiana, Miami, numbers 5 through 7. Here's the interesting thing, though. Each of those teams received at least one first-place vote, except for the Buckeyes. The actual team atop the On3 preseason top 25 did not get a first-place vote. Texas had the most with 4, Oregon with 3. That is fascinating. How does that happen? By the way, I'm wondering, I need to speak to somebody, I guess, one of our friends over at On3, and try to figure out how in the world that the team that is ranked preseason now, mind you, number 1 in the country in a poll, did not get an actual first place vote. Or I think maybe the bigger statement that it's making is that there's so much parity now in college football. Of course, you still have the elite, you have the great. But the gaps between the two levels aren't as wide, aren't as broad as they used to be. When we first got a college football playoff, there would be 6, maybe 7 teams that can make the playoff, but only 2, perhaps 3 that had a legitimate shot of winning the national title, sometimes only 1. I don't think that's the case now. I think there's still elite teams, make no mistake about it, but could we be looking at maybe 8, 9, 10, perhaps? I'm not exaggerating. I think there's become so much of an even playing field talent-wise thanks to the transfer portal, thanks to name, image, likeness. Indiana bolsters that argument by its ability to go from what was traditionally one of, if not the worst Division I football team in the land, to a playoff team, year 1 under Kurt Cignetti, and then national champions. And it did it by prudently and very deftly using the transfer portal and all the massive resources that the University of Indiana inherently had, but had never been able to fully realize, to fully leverage. What's resulted has been just a fantastic wave of parity, and not coincidentally, the SEC getting shut out of national title contention. Big Ten winning 3 straight national titles. Southeastern Conference not even playing for one. Oh, is the sky falling? I don't know. But the very things that have hindered the SEC in football has bolstered it in men's basketball. So we can litigate that another time. 9 SEC teams in this On3 poll, including Florida at number 25. More and more people are buying stock into John Sumrall, friend of the program. They like his vibe. They like his messaging. They like the energy that he's bringing to Gainesville. And I dig it. And look, it happens a lot. You get a new coach, a high-energy guy who's coming after a low-key guy, and Billy Napier, if anything, is a low-key guy. You're going to get a little bit of juice. You're going to feel a wave of enthusiasm and optimism that hasn't been around in a while, and suddenly people start looking at you differently. Florida's always had talent. Maybe not as much talent as it did in previous years, the Spurrier years, the Urban Meyer years, but still a talented team nevertheless. Part of the problem was getting that talent to fully be realized. John Sumrall, if anything, I think would be a motivating factor. He'd be a motivating force in Gainesville. We'll find out. Then what do you do for a second act? What if it doesn't pan out? Year one. What if year one is mediocre? Another ho-hum year with the Gators. What happens then? Then John Sumrall is really going to be tested. Now, you can make the argument, you can make the contention, well, it gives him a full year to fully put his fingerprints on the program, to fully have his DNA coursing through its veins. But that puts the pressure squarely on him 100%. How does he react to that? I think he'll do fine. I think he's the perfect guy at the perfect time. And we had Chris Doering of the SEC Network on a few weeks ago, former Gator, and he agreed. He liked everything about John Sumrall, his modus operandi, how he goes about his business. He loved it. And there was only, not even with Chris, but everybody else in Gainesville, not really any heartburn, considering his resume, if you were to redact the names, was pretty familiar, pretty similar to that of Billy Napier. His act is different, and that's what they need in Florida. They have to have a high-energy guy, a Pied Piper guy, a guy with some confidence / arrogance / cockiness. You think of the best years under Steve Spurrier. You think of the best years under Urban Meyer. That's the cake that bakes in Gainesville. So Florida going to be worth keeping an eye on. Missouri, Auburn, South Carolina also receiving votes in the On3 preseason top 25. I'm high on Missouri as well. Especially if Ahmad Hardy is recovered. Remember, the dude got shot just a few months ago. If he can bounce back and perform for the Tigers, whoo. And don't forget who Missouri has at quarterback. Austin Simmons, who was QB1 at Ole Miss before he got injured. Trinidad Chambliss comes in. Wally Pips him. And the rest is history. And for those who don't know, Wally Pipp was the first baseman of the Yankees until he got injured one day, had to sit out a game. In goes Lou Gehrig, and well, the rest is history and Hollywood lore. Can drink get fully help extract all the talent from Austin Simmons? He was QB1 at Ole Miss for a reason. Can he be the guy that they thought he was initially in Oxford? Because it wasn't that he was bad. It's just that Trinidad Chambliss ended up being perhaps a generational talent. How will Austin Simmons respond in Columbia? It's going to be one of the more interesting storylines in the Southeastern Conference this year and really all through college football. The AP Top 25 comes out on Monday. I'm an AP voter. I think there are 62 of us. I've done it for a long time. And it's tougher now than ever. And I think we discussed it last week. It is so hard to do any kind of preseason poll given the massive amounts of roster turnover throughout the country. Every team is subject to it to some degree. Some flip more than others. I think about Clemson that only gets a handful of transfers, but still that's a significant amount. And in any other era, getting 6 transfers in 1 year would be just cuckoo. Now you're like, oh, well, you were pretty judicious with how you used the transfer portal. You were pretty conservative with it. Wow. It's just tough. But it gives us a baseline, it gives us content, and gives us something to discuss. I'll actually be working the blog, taking online questions for the Associated Press on Monday, so feel free to hit me up or feel free to shoot me a message over on social media once my ballot goes up. Really good website called collegepolltracker.com, and it puts up all the ballots. It shows the voting body, who all's voting, how to contact us, but it shows how we vote week to week, and it keeps an eye on trends and all that. It's really an incredible resource. My ballot will be posted at some time on Monday. Hit me up over on X/Twitter at Scott H Sports. Let me know what you think about my preseason top 25. The All-American team will be coming out as well, and there are going to be just so many debates regarding that thing, such as who's going to be the quarterback? Who's going to be the All-American quarterback? You could take 5 names, 6, and put them into a hat and just randomly draw one. And whoever you pull out would be your first team quarterback, and you wouldn't get too many arguments. The depth at quarterback this year is crazy. And yet the best player in the country is probably not even a quarterback. It's probably Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State. But back to the main point, quarterback position. I mean, I'm thinking Dante Moore at Oregon. for first-team All-American quarterback, but I wouldn't argue if it was a Trinidad Chambliss. I wouldn't argue if it was a Darian Mensah at Miami, transferred from Duke, or even an Arch Manning. Arch had so many pockets second half of last season where he looked like the guy we had expected him to be. He looked like a Manning. We have to remember, he's still just beginning his journey. He's still just getting started. And for him to have that stumbling start he had last year, the way he responded to it, remember it was Ohio State, they begin the season, and if they don't play Ohio State, Texas probably goes to the playoff. For him to recover from that was absolutely phenomenal. So you have to give him his flowers for that. And again, you could pick any number of players at the quarterback position and a lot of positions, really, and you wouldn't get too much of an argument. Picking teams, much harder, much harder. And I'm going to throw myself out there for this. Last year, I'm looking at my preseason ballot now. Had Texas number 1, we just discussed, stumbled out of the gate against Ohio State. Had Clemson number 2. I had Clemson number 2 on my ballot. 4 people had them first place. They started off the season by losing to LSU at home, which we'll talk about that in a moment. Stumbled against Syracuse. Not a great year. Not a great year. Penn State at 3. James Franklin ended up getting fired. I'm going on down now, looking at it. LSU was number 9. Well, we know how that worked out. BK got fired around Halloween. Just keep on trickling down. I had Indiana 19th. I was still not completely buying into the Kurt Cignetti experience because it's just so fantastical. It's so improbable. It might be Mount Rushmore of the greatest stories in sports. I'm not being a prisoner of the moment. That's not hyperbole. That might be actually true, given how historically awful and inept Indiana football has been, and for them, the Indiana Hoosiers, to flip it. First year, go to the college football playoff. Second year, win the whole darn thing. Is there any other story that compares? I want to know. Let me know what you think. Hit me up on X at Scott H Sports. Who knows? I feel good about any number of teams winning the national or being ranked number 1, winning national title. You got to be able to navigate the whole season. You got to be able to make it through injuries, which means you have quality depth, which is the hallmark of a great team. It's just almost unfair to have to put out a preseason poll, but that's what we do. That's what we do, and the AP poll will be coming out on Monday. Where will LSU be on that poll? Fairly high. That goes back to the old argument I had earlier about a coach coming in and injecting a program with a jolt of adrenaline, a jolt of energy and optimism. That's what Lane Kiffin is doing down in Baton Rouge. But guess what? He's got another circus on his hand right now. We're going to talk about that on the other side. And then later in the program, bottom of the hour, really interesting interview. One of the topics that we have consistently discussed during the offseason has been the continued escalation of money, revenue in college athletics, specifically football, specifically with the Southeastern Conference. Mike Shadro, he's a native of South Alabama. He lives in East Tennessee. He has written a fantastic book called Agent Confidential. And essentially it's inside baseball, inside football, where he's breaking down exactly what is going on. Where the money is going, who's getting the money, where the money needs to be going, and what's coming in the future. It's a fantastic read. He's going to join us on the Duncan Williams Asset Management Hotline at the bottom of the hour. We're going to discuss his book, and I'm going to ask him a couple of simple questions. One, how much would the Southeastern Conference be worth if it was to sell naming rights to football, men's basketball, and women's basketball the way the Big 12 did and got grossly ripped off? We'll leave it at that. And 2, who would be in charge if there was a CEO? What if there was a commissioner? How would that work? How would he envision it? Those would be some questions I have from Mike Shadro when he joins us on the Duncan Williams Asset Management Hotline at the bottom of the hour. I'm Scott Hamilton, and this is Back Porch Sports, presented by Duck Club Bourbon.
Good games, good friends, real stories. That's what Saturdays are all about on the Back Porch, proudly sponsored by Duck Club Bourbon.
Welcome back. Author Mike Shadro is going to join us next segment. He's going to join us on the Duncan Williams Asset Management Hotline. He's the author of Agent Confidential. We're going to go over some business matters, business of sports, really, business of college football, how it's escalated over the last few years, changed from when he was a kid, and what we can expect going forward. I mentioned earlier about LSU. Drama around Lane Kiffin. Shocker, I know, right? Shocker. This one, though, former quarterback Jaden Daniels, you remember him. He won the Heisman Trophy a couple of years ago. Fantastic season, absolutely fantastic season. He is sideways. He feels insulted. He feels slighted. He has sent, his legal team, he's now a quarterback for the Washington Commanders, don't forget. They've sent a cease and desist letter to LSU claiming that the university's rights to his name, image, and likeness expired 180 days after his final game. He said, stop, y'all can't use any of that. Y'all better quit. And he also wants back his Heisman Trophy that is on display at LSU. Whew. Now, why is he doing this? Well, because he is perturbed, he's ticked off, he's pissed off, however you want to frame it. He is sideways. That sophomore cornerback, DJ Prickett, changed his number from 3 to 5. Number 5 being Daniels' former number. So he's decided that he's going to stop. And, well, what do you do nowadays? Well, you litigate. You litigate. And he says he feels disrespected by LSU's decision to assign that number to another player. It should be honored, he fears. It should be revered. Put it aside, never to be worn. But here's the thing. Pickett was promised the number during his recruiting phase. He's now a sophomore. And it was the former regime, the Brian Kelly regime, that said, yeah, you can have this number. It's okay, man. You can have it. It's now gotten out of control. He says he was promised a jersey, and he won't comment, a whole lot more on it. Jaden Daniels went to Instagram today and said, I hope my issues with LSU will be handled privately. But that doesn't necessarily put it to bed, does it? Doesn't help clean this thing up because it's not a great look. The optics are horrible of this. The optics are absolutely awful. First of all, Jaden Daniels, you should be worrying about playing for the Washington Commanders. You shouldn't be worrying about who is wearing your old college number. That was in college. You're in the NFL now. And what do the Washington Commanders think of all this? How are they responding to Jaden Daniels calling out his old school and just acting like he's so mad and so insulted? He's just indignant over the idea that somebody else would wear his number. It's not a great look. It's not a great look at all. And now to be clear, DJ Pickett, the player question, the guy who's now got the number 5, he has nothing really to do with this. This was what he was promised when he was being recruited. Presumably during the process, he asked, hey, can I get my number? And the previous coaching staff, yeah, no problem, dude. No problem. Good luck. God bless. And by the time comes, he switches from number 3 to number 5 this year. So you don't really fault him. He actually met with the media on Thursday, and I was very impressed how he's handled the thing so far. Here's how he responded to being asked the question.
About the number situation, I wore the number my whole life since I was 4 years old. It was a number I was promised. And I wish Jayden the best. Good player, and he did real good here, so that's all.
He did real good here, and that's all. It's my number. Sorry, pal. You're not here anymore. I'm here. You're not here anymore. I'm here. This is not a great look, and I have no problem with Pickett. He was promised a number. He took it. But it is a horrible look for Jaden Daniels. Let's think of it like this. And I want to make sure I frame this properly, okay? He won the Heisman Trophy. That's a big deal. The Heisman Trophy will always be valuable. The Heisman Trophy will always be the most iconic individual award in all of sports. I've said that for years. I said it on local shows. I said it in my column. I've said it on national program. It is the most iconic individual award in all of sports, and I don't think that'll ever change. But, dude, football's a team sport. You did not win, you being Jaden Daniels, you did not win a national championship with LSU, period. You did not win a Southeastern Conference title at LSU. Fact. And in the year that Jaden Daniels won the Heisman Trophy, LSU went 10-3, capped off by a victory, a 4-point victory over Wisconsin in the ReliaQuest Bowl. That ain't the national championship, dude. It's not even a college football playoff. And don't forget, and this bears repeating, don't forget, it's not like he was there a long time. Yeah, he had a fantastic season, scoring 50 total touchdowns, led all of the FBS with nearly 5,000 total yards, set all kinds of passer rating records. Great season. Indeed, one worthy of winning the Heisman Trophy. Once more, the most iconic individual award in all of sports. But he, like so many others in this age of pay for play, was a mercenary. He wasn't an LSU institution. He was not a guy who came up through the ranks, who signed his national letter of intent out of high school to play at LSU, and then sat on the bench and moved his way up and developed and and eventually becomes the starter and goes on to greatness. He wasn't that guy. He wasn't that guy. And he's not even from Louisiana. He's from California. He then went to Arizona State, and thanks to the system that we have now, he was able to move to LSU after that for two seasons. It was a magical season that resulted in him being the second overall pick in the 2024 NFL draft. God bless him. But it was 2 seasons. And is now in the NFL where he is making life-changing money, generational money, that does not warrant having your number put on a shelf, how much you're making now. Nor does it warrant the thought that you are immortal. Perhaps to a degree, he did win the Heisman. But it's not in the same vein of a Tim Tebow, who spent the entirety of his career at Florida and became as synonymous with the Gators as Steve Spurrier, as the Swamp, the Gator Chomp, all that. He did not win a national title, he being Jaden Daniels. Tim Tebow did that. And now they're trying to bring Joe Burrow into this mess because nobody's wearing number 9. Nobody's wearing number 9. That's because of the process that they have at LSU with regards to numbers. And it's really interesting what they do. And I'm reading directly now. LSU football has officially retired only one number permanently from circulation. That would be the number of the great Billy Cannon, number 20. Okay? But as of January 1st, 2007, current student athletes can still wear the number at the discretion of the head coach. So everything is up for grabs. Tommy Casanova's 37. It's up for grabs. You want to be Jerry Stovall's number 21, up for grabs. You see where I'm going. 7 and 18 are still very revered, very sacred numbers. You give that number to guys who produce or guys who are leaders. But as far as having a number actually out of circulation, only the number 20 of the great Billy Cannon has that distinction. So Jaden Daniels needs to chill a bit. Joe Burrow, if somebody wants to come in and wear number 9, it's at the discretion of the coach. The discretion of the coach to issue it. But let's look at it like this. And yes, Joe Burrow was a transfer. Yes, Joe Burrow came from Ohio State. I get it. The resumes are comparable, except Joe Burrow actually won a national title. Once more, team sport. And he was the face of that 2019 LSU national championship team. You think of that team, you think about Joe Burrow, and that team, in my estimation, probably the second greatest team, at least of my lifetime. I still put 1995 Nebraska Cornhuskers atop that list. But that LSU team was just special, man. Just special. This is not a good look for Jaden Daniels. It's a horrible look for Jaden Daniels. I don't know how he can walk this back. I don't know how he can walk this back, but I've got more thoughts on it. And I've got some more ideas on what needs to be done in order to preserve the sanctity of numbers. Okay? And here's something to think about. Alabama football, no retired numbers. They treat number 12. They treat number 22. They treat number 58. That would be the great Joe Namath's number. Number 22, Mark Ingram, first Heisman Trophy winner at Alabama. Number 58, the great Derek Thomas. They treat those numbers different, but they are not officially retired. Auburn's only got 4 numbers retired. Cam's number 2, the most recent. Tennessee has 8. Georgia has 4. You see what I'm saying? It's a limited sample size at these schools. North Carolina basketball, for all of the great players who have come through there, a program, an athletic program as revered as any and any sport across the land, 8 numbers have been retired. Now they have 50 jerseys dangling from the rafters of the Dean Dome, but only 8 numbers actually retired. It takes something special. And the idea of retiring a number in 2026, to me, is kind of stale. You better have been really, really special. Special. Not just good, not just great, but special. I'm thinking of Tim Tebow. Love him, hate him, think he's inspiring, think he's a phony. Does he insist on himself? Whatever. He was special. He probably should have won more than one Heisman, too. He probably should have been the second person ever behind Ohio State's Archie Griffin to win multiple Heisman trophies. But there was something called Tebow fatigue. That was a very real thing. That was a very real thing. Otherwise, I think he has multiple Heismans. Again, special. National title, special. Jaden Daniels, not special. Good, yes. Great, yes. Special, no. There's a difference. There's a difference. And part of this whole thing could have been put to bed if the current coach, Lane Keifin, had handled it a little bit more prudently, a little more thoughtfully. We'll talk about that later in the program. But on the other side, Mike Shadro, he's written a book called Agent Confidential. He's going to join us on the Duncan Williams Asset Management Hotline. We're going to discuss the book, and we're going to discuss the wild, wild, wild economics of college football in 2026. Mike Shadro joining us on the other side. It's Back Porch Sports, presented by Duck Club Bourbon.
From the blind to the back porch, some traditions are built to be shared. Duck Club Bourbon, real heritage, no gimmicks. Proud sponsor of Back Porch Sports.
It's Back Porch Sports, presented by Duck Club Bourbon. Money, more than anything else now, drives the train in college athletics, specifically football. Some of the bigger pieces of news that we had in the offseason, and it's a 365-day cycle with news in college football. Jersey patch sales. We're getting a lot of litigation. Monster selling the naming rights for Complete Sports. My mind is blown by that. And, of course, the arms race between the Big Ten and the Southeastern Conference with regards to revenue. Who's getting the most revenue? Who's allocating the most revenue to its membership? It's a lot to keep up with. What's next? That's the big question. We're going to ask our guest, and he has an interesting background. This is one of the more interesting backgrounds we've had. He's the author of a book called Agent Confidential. You can follow him on X at Jimmy Sexton. I love that, Mike Shadro. I think that's absolutely fantastic. But before we get into the details of your book, and I ask you your take regarding some of the bigger things or events or engines powering college athletics right now, you're not a former agent. You're not a former coach. You're just a guy who ended up figuring out the world of college athletics from the money side, the business side, and you have a pretty good take on it all. Kind of give us the quick elevator pitch about your background.
So very good. So Scott, really nice to be here. Thanks for having me. So I have a parallel path. I have 40 years experience in business, including some private equity experience. So I have good business experience, but then I started helping out some coaches at East Tennessee State University a long time ago, walk the sidelines, help some of them that didn't have representation. So I took my business experience and then what I learned walking the sidelines and being behind the scenes in meetings and helping coaches a little bit and just put it all together to put together Agent Confidential. So kind of a parallel path of business and a love of college football.
So what did you learn?
Yeah. So what what's interesting is what I learned is what the public sees is usually not what's really happening behind the curtain. So for example, like with coaching searches, the public sees the last 10%. 90% is done before the public even knows there is a search, because the ADs are talking to agents and, hey, what would it take? And they all have the list, in the left-hand drawer that they hope they don't have to open, but they know what the numbers would take on that particular list. So it's just what we see and love is just different when you pull the curtain back. And once you pull the curtain back, you won't look at it the same way again, but we still love it. But it's just very different because it's very much a business nowadays.
That's a really good point, because I try to keep my personal allegiances to myself, but there's a team I grew up adoring and they could walk on water. But once I got older and I start to actually know some of the people who were involved with the program, you meet some coaches, you meet some athletes, you hear some stories. It really drives home that old adage, man. Don't meet your heroes. It kind of takes a little bit of bloom off the rose.
Yeah, it really does. And one of the stories I tell in the book is in 1992, I was in the banking business in Mississippi, and I was down at a little small branch. And the loan officer called me in his office one day, and he showed me a loan document for a Chevy Cavalier for a local lawyer. And I'm thinking the lawyer must not be doing very well. And he said, "It's not for the lawyer. It's for that power forward down at the high school that's going to unnamed SEC school to play basketball." The money was changing hands then too. It's just out in public now. So very much a business, but just that's an example I use of pulling the curtain back and seeing what a lot of times has already been out. It was out there for a long time.
Well, what do you want people to extrapolate from this book? I mean, obviously your personal story is something else that you've been able to marry the two together, your business background and your love of college athletics. But it takes a little something more to write a book. And you're not going to write the next Gone with the Wind. You're not going to write the next Godfather.
No.
You're not going to you're in a nice spot in East Tennessee in your little cabin by the lake, I'm sure, and you're happy as can be. But you're not going to make a fortune on the book, but you still want to move books because you want to teach people a lesson. What are you wanting to teach people?
So what I'm wanting to teach them is that, again, to look behind the curtain as to what's really happening. College football is a massive business. We think of it as rivalry and pageantry and all that, and it's still there, but it's still a multi-billion-dollar business. And one of the points I make in the book is that college football is probably the only billion-dollar business where you can't you don't know who the CEO is. Yeah. And that's what I'm trying to point out. So I'm trying to talk about help people see coaching searches, how we got here. I talk about how we started with big buyouts with Gus Malzahn, how we got to the point we are now, how coaching searches happen. And then we have a chapter 24 called Follow the Money, which is about private equity and their influence in the game. So that's the main thing. I just want them to see the business behind the sport we love.
Can't see the CEO. I wrote down that line. I think that is absolutely brilliant. And even if we were to get the one thing we need the most, a commissioner, he or she is still not going to be the CEO. Yeah. The money's going to be going all over the places, and there's still going to be multiple, even though that person would presumably have unilateral power.
Right.
There's going to be a lot of people with a lot to say.
There are, and that's when you look at private equity. I was asked the other day on another show, tell me about private equity. I said, private equity isn't bad. Private equity isn't evil. They're not good. They're in it for the money, and they are here to stay. And that's what we're seeing out there now. So be it the jersey patches, be it the media deals, the difference between the Big 12, the Big 10 and the SEC on revenue, it's all there. But, man, we're talking a $15 billion a year business, and that's what it is.
Joined by Mike Shadro, Agent Confidential. That's the book. You can follow him on X at Jimmy Sexton. I love that handle. That's a really good handle. You're talking about private equity, and that's kind of a dirty word, a dirty phrase in college athletics. But as you said, it's not going anywhere. It's here to stay. But the thing about private equity is those people want a return on their investment. Those aren't boosters donating to build a new library to put up another wing on the east side of the stadium. They want to get their money back. Yeah. How do schools balance that, putting in a return, but at the same time saying, hey, we will take your money because we have to have it?
That's a great question. And I think that's what's still trying to be figured out right now, because if you look at private equity in the private sector, they come in and take equity stakes. Well, you can't come in and take an equity stake at a good old state university, right? You can't do that. So what they're looking for is to loan money, and the pot at the end of the rainbow, the pot of gold, are media rights. That's what they're looking at. So if you look at what, for example, what Redbird Capital in the Big 12 did earlier this summer, Redbird came in, was going to offer $30 million per school, 10% interest, but they wanted a cut of the media rights. That's why the schools didn't just jump on it. And the other piece of that is Redbird Capital owns Paramount. Paramount owns a big piece of CBS, thus another media angle to offset the Big Ten with Fox and the SEC with ESPN. So it's just interesting to see all the moving parts, but private equity is here to stay, Scott.
Does Brent Yormark, and Monster Energy deal aside, $20 million to be the sponsor of men's basketball, women's basketball, and football. And when you figure it out, that comes out to a little over $1 million per school. That's chump change,
That's
all
awful.
things considered. Well, that you consider that Notre Dame's getting between 18 and 20 million for SoFi, I think.
Yeah.
Wow.
Financial.
So, but all things considered, though, other than that deal, would you say a Brett Yormark at the Big 12 is ahead of the curve when it comes to these sorts of arrangements? Or Mike, before you answer, is it only because the Big 12 has been first and maybe the likes of a Greg Sankey or even a Tony Petitti might actually have their ducks more in a row because they are working behind the scenes and what they are going to unveil, if they unveil something, might be more robust and more sensible?
Yeah, I think that Tony Petit, I thought that Brett Yormark at the Big 12 was just trying to get out in front of it and try to create, to manage his league. And I give him credit because that's, if you look at the revenue difference between the ACC, the Big 12, and the Big 10 and the SEC, last year, the ACC gave $47 million per school. The Big 12 gave just under $30 million per school. The Big 10, almost 80 million, and the SEC 72 million. So even though we talk about the revenue gap between the Big 10 and the SEC, the big gap is between those top two and the next two. So I think that's where Brett Yormark was just trying to be proactive and make some things happen in the best interest of his conference.
Well, and I've said this, anytime you're the first in something, you're setting the market, you're putting yourself at risk. More than likely, you're going to not get quite as much value, which they got exponentially less value. But we'll litigate that another time, Mike. You talk about the gap between 1 and 2, between the Big 10 and the Southeastern Conference. When does that gap close? Will it close? Is it only going to get wider? Is it all dependent upon the next round of TV contracts?
Well, I think it's going to continue to widen. I'm by no means an expert in this, but I think ultimately you're looking at the Big Two at some point pulling away, whatever that looks like, with the super conference type of thing. So I think that the gap is going to continue to widen. But if you look at the Protect College Sports Act, remember the Ashley, is it Moody, the senator from Florida, at the very last minute put that thing in there about, okay, you got 180 days to move conferences without the 5 years. So that was the Florida State Miami amendment, essentially. And if you think of the utter chaos that will create in the middle of football season, if this thing actually happens, is just crazy. So, the interesting thing about now you've got the AFL-CIO, weighing in on it. You've got the Black Congressional Conference. You've got all these amendments. The bottom line is every one of these special interests wants to put their page in the rule book. Book, and it's going to be very difficult for it to pass in the context that it is right now. And that's when I think we're looking at maybe the plan B, whatever that might be, that Sankey is talking about and potentially breaking away. But September is going to be a really interesting month to see what happens with this potential legislation.
My concern is this, and we've been around the block for a number of years, both in sports and in real life. And people get excited about something at the beginning. Protect College Sports Act. Oh man, we're going to make it happen. Yeah. Well, when something sits on the shelf for a little while, it's kind of like a toy when you was a kid. You forget about it. It's not quite as appealing. You find something else. And Mike, we could have any number of things happen over the next month to take away from this thing, getting the attention it needs. We've got a war going on. We've got an economy that's got some problems. We just picked a new attorney general. My concern is this, that I don't see this happening for 6 months, a year. I mean, when do you expect it to come to life, if it ever does?
When it first came about with the president's memo in April, I point blank said, folks, we're looking at a midterm election year and nothing's going to get done in 2026. And that was just my guess. I do have a degree in political science from the University of Alabama, which doesn't qualify me to do anything, but I'm pretty good around election time. And but I said, there's no way they're going to get the 60 votes to prevent a filibuster and get this thing through. And now at the last minute, you've got all these factors weighing in and coming in. Again, AFL-CIO, Black Congressional Conference, that Florida timing amendment. It's just not. It's just not going to happen. I don't think. And I think that Cody Campbell is in Ted Cruz's ear. I think he has as much to do with the writing of this bill as anybody. So that's just a really interesting thing. But don't underestimate the power of the Big Ten and the SEC, because they were just kind of hands off, and then suddenly a week and a half or so ago they came out and said, "Okay, we're in." Boy, that was negotiating power. If you remember what Tony Petitti said at Big Ten Media Days when he got to the podium, he said, "Well, I talked to Greg Sankey 5 times this morning before breakfast." And then they're not talking about the weather, Scott. They're negotiating legislation with Capitol Hill and Ted Cruz said game changer, getting them on board. So it's still going to be very interesting to see what happens with that legislation. But I'm with you. I don't think anything happens very soon.
Yeah, to your point, the Protect College Sports Act, it grew from 110 pages to 170 pages once Sankey and Petitti decided they were going to have a text message thread about it over breakfast. Think about that. Mike, before I let you go, and the book, again, is Agent Confidential. You can get that anywhere.
Yep.
You can get a book. I saw it on Amazon. I'm downloading it
Yep.
tonight, I promise you. But you've already got a follow-up book in the works. Can
Yep.
you give us the synopsis? Don't tell us, because
Yeah.
I know we're supposed to buy it and read it. Just give us the
Right.
synopsis.
So it'll be what the premise of the next book will be, really what's next. What does the future look like? In the final chapter of the book of this book, I lay out the way where I think this is going, and it will be a continuation of that. But I feel like there's a lot of good learning in this book. Again, it's on Amazon, it's Kindle, and then I did the Audible myself. Which was very difficult, but a lot of fun. So if you don't mind a South Alabama accent, you can spend 4 hours letting me read it to you.
Well, you see, that's exactly the kind I want, though. I want to be able to sit on my porch and just let Mike read his book to me. I'm down.
There you go. Mike. Yeah, it was fun.
How difficult was that, though?
It was very difficult. I got the book published in I'm trying to think, late March, and it took me about 6 weeks to get the Audible done. I did it here in the studio in my office, and it was just very, very difficult. You send it in, and then they would say, "Oh, well, you got this decimal wrong." So it was, I almost gave up 2 or 3 times, but I thought we need to stay at it. So finally did it. So I think I'm a little better at it, but it was really difficult to get the Audible done myself instead of paying somebody to read it.
The name of the book is Agent Confidential. You can get it on Amazon, the X account, Twitter. It's Faux Jimmy Sexton. One more time. I love it. His name is Mike Shadro. Mike, you are the man, brother. I appreciate you joining us this morning.
It's been my pleasure, Scott. I really enjoyed it. Hope to talk to you again during the season. A lot will be going on.
All right, you the man. That's Mike Shadro, author of Agent Confidential, joining us on the Duncan Williams Asset Management Hotline. Stick around. It's Back Porch Sports, presented by Duck Club Bourbon.
We believe Saturdays are built on family, tradition, and the stories that stick with you. Duncan Williams helps protect the legacy behind it all, today, tomorrow, and for what comes next.
We're making a final lap. Back Porch Sports, presented by Duck Club Bourbon. I want to thank Mike Shadro for joining us on the Duncan Williams Asset Management Hotline. Excellent insight from Mike, giving us his perspective on the economics of college athletics in 2026. Quick reminder, if you want to explore the prediction markets, well, guess what? Kalshi is going to give you a chance. Visit Kalshi.com/blitz, and you'll get $20 to begin your journey in the prediction markets. That's Kalshi.com/blitz. I promised it earlier, and I've got some more thoughts on this. I've got thoughts on this Jaden Daniels situation and how Lane Keifin could have alleviated a lot of this. Lane Keifin could have nipped this in the bud before it ever became a thing, but Kiffin's going to Kiffin. He can't help himself. First, let's do this. Let's play what Lane Keifin had to say last week, earlier this month, when it was first brought up that Pickett would be wearing the number 5. Here's what Lane had to say.
DJ is in 5, and that was a situation that was promised to him in recruiting here for him to sign here. And I've done a lot of research on that with the family and the representatives and the people. And so really, I didn't have a decision to make. It was promised to the kid. It wasn't done for whatever. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to judge something that I wasn't here of. But when a kid's promised something to come to school, he should wear it. And so at that point, I don't really think that's my decision. Should be honored what he was told. And so Just want to know.
Joey Freshwater is going to Joey Freshwater. Talk about promises. There's probably a lot of guys at Ole Miss that are in Oxford, Mississippi right now who were promised that their coach would be Lane Kiffin in 2026. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. So it's kind of hypocritical for him to take that stance. And that's the stance he had last week before it all really went, I don't want to say nuclear, but it's definitely escalated under Jaden Daniels sending that cease and desist order. And he shouldn't even be worrying about it at this point. He should be worrying about the Washington Commanders. The Commanders don't give two darns about what happens in Baton Rouge. They couldn't care less. He needs to be focused on what's happening in the nation's capital, not what's happening over at LSU. He should be worried about the Washington Commanders' locker room. They're the ones who are paying him. He needs to check himself with this. And, well, he hopes to get it resolved privately. Well, it's too late now, dude. It's reached the point of demarcation. But once more, Lane Kiffin could have alleviated this. He knew that this was going to happen, okay? He knew it was going to happen. The kid was promised a number. What should have went down is Kiffin picking up the phone or having somebody pick up the phone, contacting Jaden Daniels and going, hey, man, we got this situation here. We got this kid. He was promised by BK, Brian Kelly's group, that he could wear number 5. He's going to switch numbers now. I just want to make sure you're cool with it, dude. I want to make sure you're fine with it. Are you okay with this? And what that would have done is at least given Jaden Daniels the opportunity to say, hey, LSU was good to me. It did so much for me. Yeah, he can wear the number. Good luck and God bless. And it would have positioned him as almost like a martyr. He would have enhanced his profile exponentially, which his agent and I'm sure his sponsors would have loved. Or, of course, he could have said no, but let's play devil's advocate and assumed he said yes. Well, what else happens from that? Lane Kiffin suddenly got a lot of goodwill with Jaden Daniels, Heisman Trophy winner at LSU, who he didn't coach, but he now has this relationship with. Jaden Daniels is going to get another LSU, or rather NFL contract. Guess what? He strokes a check back to Old State U. Lane Kiffin's winning. And DJ Pickett, happy that Lane Kiffin went out of his way to make sure that this kid was given what he was promised by the previous regime, even though technically he wasn't on the hook for it. That's how it should have went down. But Lane Kiffin is going to Lane Kiffin. He's going to play all sides, and at the end of the day, he does not care what you think. He does not care what you say about him. He has other things he is interested in, and they all involve Lane Kiffin world. This guy, he was asked the question again. When after the cease and desist order came out, he was asked the question again. This time he's doing the old bob and weave. Here's more Lane Kiffin.
Just want to give you the opportunity to comment on the Jaden Daniels situation.
I'd be disappointed if that wasn't the first question. I commented a week ago on that. And so that's the comment that I had, and we're moving forward.
It's just to ask one more question, just to understand numbers. If someone were to ask for number 9, would that be on the table for you? How would you handle that situation when a player asks for that?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into that. There's a lot to numbers and whether they're retired, whether they're not, and different versions. And so I don't have an answer.
I don't have an answer. Kiffin's going to Kiffin. He's going to have it both ways. That's his modus operandi, going after what he wants, when he wants, however he wants it. That's how he ended up at LSU. And I've said it before and I've said it again. I was suckered. I wasn't alone. So many of us watched that ESPN documentary. It was basically an infomercial for Ole Miss football and Lane Kiffin last fall. What was it? The many lives of Lane Kiffin. And we're seeing him in this small southern town. We're seeing how his family had followed him, his ex-wife, his children, his brother. I think his parents might have been there as well before his father died. And you're watching him get acclimated to small town life. You're seeing him do the hot yoga. You're seeing him with this dog. He's got Juice the dog, and it's just such a wonderful story. And the townspeople are embracing this guy from California, and the team is just all in with their coach, and he's doing this and he's doing that. False. He suckered us all. I remember sitting on my couch, and I'm watching the documentary, and I grab my phone after it's over, and I shoot off a text message to Chris Lowe, then at ESPN. He's now at On 3, and he was in the documentary. And I said, man, that was a good job, dude. You did really good. And then I put this in there. I said, that documentary was a requiem for all divorced dads out there. That's what it was. A requiem for everybody, for every guy who has kids who's been divorced. We could relate to what he was dealing with. Suddenly, Lane Keifin seemed relatable. Even though he made exponentially more than us, he was more famous than us, this and that, blah, blah. He was relatable. That was the tie that bound us all together. And I felt like we connected with him, and we were pulling for Lane Keifin in that moment. I was pulling for him. I was ready to celebrate anything and everything he accomplished. Well, guess what? It didn't age well. It didn't age well, and it aged quickly. Brian Kelly gets fired, and pretty soon the soap opera really begins. Billy Napier gets fired too, and it really begins. Is Lane going to Baton Rouge? He's going to go to Florida. Is he going to stay at Ole Miss? He's sending his ex-wife on this tour and looking at homes in Gainesville and checking out homes in Baton Rouge, and it was just a mess. And meanwhile, he's trying to work a deal with Keith Carter, the AD at Ole Miss, so he can keep coaching his team no matter what he decides, because he knows it's a playoff team. They're going to the CFP. He wants to stay at the wheel. It's his team. He wants to stay at the wheel. He wants to get the credit. And God bless Keith Carter. I've got issues with that guy over the tampering and with the Luke Ferrelli and all that. But he stood his ground during that whole mess with Lane Keifin. He did not allow Joey Freshwater to chop him off at the knees. He said, no, dude, you cannot have it both ways. You're in or you're out. What's it going to be? And he ended up inevitably being out. That way, that's kind of the way Lane Keifin handled it. It was the other staff that promised that number to Pickett. It was the other staff that said, you can have number 5. But it's Lane Kiffin's reluctance or inability or just not giving a crap about the whole deal that has made this situation worse. It's made it bad on him. It's made Jaden Daniels look horrible, and it's of his own doing, but Kiffin has made it worse. Kiffin's going to Kiffin, man. Anybody that would fake having a dog that wasn't really your dog, pretending this dog is your dog, and it turns out he's not your dog, how can you trust a dude like that? That sums everything up, and he just did not think this through. He did not think it's through, and instead what he's got now is another clown show in his hands. It actually could have been a pretty good story. Jaden Daniels could have looked good. The kid would have got his number, and big checks would have come down the road. There ain't no checks coming from Jaden Daniels now to LSU. Make no mistake about that. At least not until Lane Keifin is gone. It might never happen. Jaden Daniels might be pissed in perpetuity. What a mess. But you know what? We love it. We love it. Because it's what Kiffin does. And we've learned now that that's who he is. There is no other narrative. There is no other narrative. That's it for this edition of Back Porch Sports. Once more, I want to thank Mike Shadro, author of Agent Confidential, for joining us on the Duncan Williams Asset Management Hotline. Hey, don't forget to check out our podcast on YouTube. Also, don't forget to hit me up on social media. My DMs are open at Scott H Sports over on Twitter/X. Questions, comments, complaints, whatever, hit me up. If there's a topic you would like us to discuss, we're happy to do it. If there is a guest you would like us to have on, we will do our darndest to facilitate it. But otherwise, until next time, I'm Scott Hamilton, and this has been Back Porch Sports, presented by Duck Club Bourbon.